When last we spoke, you were literally you were driving down to, what was it, Cherry Point, to and I watched this, to sit down along with President Trump, Governor Cooper, basically any congressperson who could get there, emergency management folks, Kirstjen Nielsen from DHS, and so. What have you been up to? And as you look around the state of North Carolina and the hurricane damage that we have seen, what is your overall impression? What are the stories you're hearing?
Yeah, well, it's been a while, obviously, since we talked. But that week after the storm was obviously the craziest from the storm hitting to the full week after. Just to kind of sum it up for you a little bit, I was able to go on a helicopter tour with the National Guard about 1 week after, so it was Friday after the storm hit, and it was pretty unbelievable, Casey. I mean, the amount of square miles underwater in our state 1 week later. I'm not exaggerating. What I saw alone was probably 300 square miles of just land under 5 to 10 feet of water in some places. And so there's still places that are flooded. There's still roads that are out. There's still all this kind of stuff. The routine. But the stories are personal. So it's not just about the land. It's not just about the water. It's obviously about the people, and that's what we're trying to deal with. My staff went down a few days after the storm, and we helped a young man down in New Bern clean out his house, and he was probably his mid-30s, and he lost everything, about 5 feet of water in his house, so we had to gut that and get all the flooring out and all the sheetrock out and insulation and everything else. It's a nasty job, 2 days after the water recedes, and place is already full of mold. All his belongings are gone, and people think they can save stuff, and they want to try to save stuff, but you really can't. And so young people get to rebuild. Older folks that have retired and don't have flood insurance have lost everything, a lifetime worth of all of their stuff. And it's a sad story when you don't have flood insurance. And as you know, there were a lot of people that were in places that weren't floodplains and didn't ever have a flood and didn't ever really need flood insurance. So there you have it. Well,
and some of the pictures, I'll tell you, one of the more amazing videos I saw was Pender County Fire Department that was slow rolling trucks down I-40, hosing thousands of fish into the ditch. Did you see those pictures? That video?
I did see those pictures. Yeah, and apparently the smell is great too. You drive through these places now, even now a couple weeks after, and the smell, the stench of the floodwaters and all that stagnant water sitting there. It's going to last a long time. And there's all kinds of different issues, from mosquitoes in these areas.
Super mosquitoes, Dan.
Super mosquitoes.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen super mosquitoes, they're quite a sight to see when they land all over your body.
Yeah, like three times as big. It was pretty horrendous, some of those down there. So what? Here's my thing. I thought that the roundtable that I witnessed and much of the interaction between people of all different political stripes, I think is what you hope to see. And I think here in North Carolina, we did a very good job of it, because people understood the gravity of the situation, because floodwaters don't care who you voted for. But now all of these little death by 1,000 cuts things are starting. You got this, was it Colbert is doing the book? Stephen Colbert, I don't know what to think of this. Stephen Colbert, the comedian who basically just pistol whips Trump for a living on his late night show, wrote a book that is just a book about quotes that Trump said while in North Carolina. And it's not in a positive manner. It's obviously mocking the guy, and the proceeds go to Florence victims. You got arguments over, or op-eds over the level of voting available to minorities, and how the state needs to make that a priority for them to be able to vote. How about we make it a priority for them to be able to eat, have a place to stay, and then we got the voting thing covered as well. And in a special session that could last weeks, are we really getting into political arguments now? Why does this take weeks to deal with this at the political level?
Well, I mean, two sides of that. So there are multiple questions going on there. I won't comment on Stephen Colbert. I think it speaks for itself. But, related to is this thing becoming political, I think that you're always going to have that. We saw maybe a little bit of that from the back row yesterday as we were passing legislation to deal with the storm. I think everybody's really on the same page. We're dealing with things like voting and making sure that precincts are open if a building was flooded out, to give the county flexibility to move that. If they can't get to it because roads are out, they can move the building because of that. I'm giving them all kinds of flexibility, giving them extra flexibility for ability to register to vote from a timing perspective. So all of that was taken care of in legislation yesterday. So nobody should be disenfranchised there. There's from an identity perspective of people getting licenses and driver's licenses and birth certificate, and waiving the fees for those things for people that lost their documents, to education, to giving schools flexibility on the days that students have to be in class, how many days they can miss. They can miss up to 20 days, and the flexibility is all on the county is to decide how they work all that out. And so it's actually a massive nightmare when you add up all the components of this flood and the trickle down effect of it. And so the reason that the session is going to take several weeks is because things are going to unfold, and the legislature wants to deal with them in the proper manner, to make sure they're not just throwing money, on top of money to deal with something without really knowing the implications. So that's why we're going to come back about every week probably to figure out what's next, and also to see what the federal government's doing, because they're starting to have skin in the game. The House passed a bill, the Senate's passing a bill, the federal government's involved from an administrative standpoint. So everybody's been great to work with, Casey. You can talk about politics, but it's been great. I think the governor did a great job. I think the emergency management team, Michael Sprayberry and his team, they did a phenomenal job dealing with this. I was fielding calls through the night, during the storm for a couple days, just frantic calls from all kinds of folks, and I would send those to the emergency management people, and they dealt with it in a very professional manner and answered all the requests, and some of them were crazy requests and then extreme requests for emergency responders to get to. So I think everybody's done a great job, including the federal government, but now the tough part really begins. It's the months and years afterwards for recovery, and people in Houston and Texas can tell you that they're still recovering from Harvey. People in Louisiana can tell you that they're still recovering from Harvey, and this is going to take some time.
Yeah, well, and some of it's geography too, because when you ask people, especially people sitting in Raleigh, probably, and the Triad or Triangle for that matter, to talk about how the storm affected them, unless they've actually been to some of these places, people in Fayetteville have an incredibly different story from their neighbors an hour to the north. And so how do you make sure everyone in the state is knowing that it doesn't matter whether you're on the coast or up in the mountains where we saw some damage, we're here for you? You think it's being covered?
Yeah. No, it's really not. But, unless you got in a helicopter like I did and flew over the state to see the extent of the damage, you really wouldn't know anyway. You're not going to know it from CNN or the Weather Channel or Fox. They're not going to be able to cover it. They set up their camera on a little corner somewhere, and when the water recedes, they go away. But the problem really starts when the water recedes. So we have thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands, of people that are homeless right now in North Carolina. They're trying to find a place to stay, and there's no quick fix when you're in rural North Carolina. There are no hotels. FEMA doesn't get its trailers in overnight. It takes months to assess damage till you can start fixing somebody's home and all these kind of things. So it's a massive problem. We're going to have to come up with some really creative solutions to house people in rural parts of our state before they leave and never come back again. If there's any area of your state that can't afford to lose its residents, it's the rural part of our state. And so you have farmers that may be out of business forever. They've lost everything, and they may not come back. And there's long trail of consequences that go along with that.
Just to speak to that real quick, and then I'll let you go. In the world of media, obviously market rank is a big deal, and it's based on a variety of things, population being chief among them, but also the way that lines are drawn. And right around the time that we were revamping how markets are ranked in my business, we had what happened in New Orleans, and when you actually lay eyes on what it was the year before and what it still is population-wise, you realize exactly what you're talking about. People leaving and not coming back. And it was very, very detrimental to the city of New Orleans after even everything else happened.
Yeah, and you have these small towns that already have very little tax base, and the people that are there, especially you have these farming families that are the kind of the backbone of your community. In a lot of cases, if they pack up and leave, you're going to see some of these communities go away. You're going to see some communities that were flooded not be communities anymore. Places like Fairhope, Fairbluff, and places like that may not be. May not be communities anymore, so it's going to be a long road, and it's I think incumbent a lot upon the media as well to continue to get the story out for months and months ahead to make sure that we're helping people, not just rebuilding houses and getting businesses running again and those kind of things, but that we're helping our people.
Well, for some reason, apparently parties from 1982 are much more exciting than hurricanes from just weeks ago. So
that's right.
All right, I do appreciate it, Dan. Have yourself a good one. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Thank you, Casey. Take care now.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
You too.